Okay, in the event that you didn't have a chance to watch the Village Idiot's address to the nation yesterday, or you didn't have a chance to watch my live analysis of that on Substack, um, I, I think I want to share two things to kind of clarify. And of course, you could always watch the recording, recording of the ridiculous speech. But in essence, what I took from it was there was a sense of desperation. In essence, it was an angry old guy yelling at all of us, yelling at the nation, um, to believe a cacophony of nonsensical untruths, right? A bunch of made up talking points, um, and to demand that we buy into that, and to do it in a slightly more coherent manner than he's usually capable of, because he must have been informed by creeps like Stephen Miller or whomever that he's in political trouble right now and he needs to stay hyper focused. At least read the teleprompter as much as possible and improvise less. He clearly really struggled to do that, but did it. And normally, what is a 90-minute to 120-minute long-winded, incoherent, semi-raging, self-grandizing babble, which is what I expected last night, and I was kind of disappointed we didn't get that, was about a 15, 20, 25-minute, I don't really know, um, compressed speech where he almost desperately yelled at us to believe him. And I was looking for some reporting that would kind of, really kind of encapsulate how I felt about it. And I want to read that to you today. This is from Steve Bannon. MS Now Steve Bannon. Bannon is a producer for the Rachel Maddow Show. Every so often, I like his reporting on something, and this is one of those times. So, the idea behind a year-end presidential address isn't necessarily unreasonable. In late December, it stands to reason that White House officials would take a minute to pause and reflect and take stock of the year that was, to give the public an assessment of their performance, right? Almost like a early State of the Union, right? Sort of, without Congress being there and without all the pomp and circumstance and noise, and just a mid-year update. Doesn't seem crazy, right? Except when a crazy person is doing it, right? That is, in theory. In practice, Donald Trump's year-end primetime address presented the American public with 18 minutes of combative presidential blame shifting and excuse-making packaged in the unsubtle desperation of a man who doesn't seem to understand why so much of the public doesn't appreciate his systemic failures and embarrassments, but above all, the Republican president did what he always does. He lied uncontrollably. In fact, his speech was so littered with brazen falsehoods that it was rather easy to come up with a top 10 list, and that's what Brennan has done here, and I appreciate his efforts. Number 10. Already have secured a record-breaking $18 trillion of investment in the United States. It'd be great if that were true, but that's not. The number started out at $4 trillion several months ago, and then it magically became $7 trillion, and the $7 trillion magically became $14 trillion. Then the $14 trillion became $19 trillion, and then more recently, the $19 trillion became $21 trillion, and then in another speech, he said it was $22 trillion, but now we're back to the number that he hasn't touched on yet, which is $18 trillion. The GDP of the United States of America, the entire GDP, is $30 trillion. The national debt is $38 trillion. So if this bonehead would have somehow brought in $18 trillion of investment and tariff money, we would be almost ready to, exceed our GDP, our entire GDP, and, we'd be able to pay off more than half of the national debt. So that was number one. Number two, or number 9, I should say, that our country was being invaded by an army of 25 million people. That wasn't even close to being true. Um, I was elected in a landslide. He obviously wasn't. The price of Thanksgiving turkey was down 33% compared to Biden last year. Brennan says, is he still peddling this nonsense? Evidently, yes, though it's still not true. The one big beautiful bill passed this year included, among other things, quote, no tax on Social Security. That might sound nice, but that wasn't actually part of the far-right package. There is nothing in the big beautiful bill, as Brennan suggests here, that means that Social Security, which is pre-taxed income, won't be taxed. I mean, it would be great if it wouldn't be. My 88-year-old mom and my soon-to-be 91-year-old dad still pay taxes on their Social Security, and that's not going to change. Number 5, when I was in office, inflation was the worst. When I took office, inflation was the worst in 48 years. But some would say in the history of our country, Trump says this all the time, but it's demonstrably false. Inflation wasn't the worst. It was in 48 years. Inflation was it was the post-COVID inflation. It was brought down to almost 2%, 2.4%. We're now up hovering well over 3%, heading toward 4%, even though the inflation cooled a little bit this month, in the sense it only went up. It only increased by 2.7%, a little bit less than year to year that economists expected, but unemployment is still raging. And we're all feeling the inflation at the grocery store. Number 4, I've settled 8 wars in 10 months. Brendan says, I get the sense that he's convinced himself that happened, but it hasn't, no matter how many times he repeats the lie. Number 3, gasoline is now under $2.50 a gallon in much of the country. We are one of the cheapest gasolines in the country right now. And here in Jersey, we're at $2.69 was the best price that I saw. The volatility continued in some states. By the way, it just hit $1.99 a gallon. That's a weird thing to lie about, right? Because it's so easily fact-checkable since consumers know better. But for the record, it obviously wasn't true. Number 2, the price of eggs is down 82% since March, and everything else is falling rapidly. The president would very likely be more popular if this were true, but it is not. Number 1, I negotiated directly with the drug companies and foreign nations, which were taking advantage of our country for many decades to slash prices on drugs and pharmaceuticals by as much as 400, 500, and even 600%. In earlier speeches, he was talking about 1,000%. There was that event at the, I think it was in the Oval Office where Dr. Oz was talking about stuff like this, and they had all the pharmaceutical executives there, and the Village Idiot was sort of front and center, and one of those executives passed out, and he just stood there looking irritated that the guy just went down. If he even knew the guy went down, because to me it seemed like he was sort of sleep standing with his eyes open, but everybody else seems to have a different perspective of that. I could be wrong. This Whopper claimed the top spot for me because on top of the absurdity of the lie, one has to layer the fact that this guy still doesn't understand how numbers work. I could keep going. In the same speech, for example, Trump said he'd restored international respect for the United States, which is the opposite of what actually happened. Before that, the incumbent president insists that during Joe Biden's presidency, the crime was at record levels with law enforcement, and words such as that just with law enforcement and words such as that just absolutely forbidden. Both of these two claims were wrong. Indeed, I'm honestly not sure which was the greater challenge, chronicling all of Trump's lies from his end of the year speech or trying to find a claim in the remarks that was true. Either way, the president found it necessary to lie incessantly throughout this year. End address speaks volumes about just how awful the first year of the second term has been. Please subscribe to this Substack channel. 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 live at a time. That's how we move through this, or in this case, one YouTube video at a time. That's how we survive this.